Imagine sitting on the Iron Throne after fighting an entire war to claim it. You finally have the crown. You have King's Landing. You have your army. And you have your dragons. But then, one by one, the people closest to you begin turning against you. Your strongest ally is captured. One of your dragon riders is preparing to betray you. Your husband is far away. Your enemies are gathering at Tumbleton. And somewhere in the darkness, Aegon Targaryen is alive. And worse, his dragon is alive too. That is where House of the Dragon Season 3, Episode 8 begins. After 7 episodes of bloodshed, betrayal, and political manipulation, the Dance of the Dragons has reached its breaking point. The Blacks and Greens are no longer simply fighting over the Iron Throne. They are fighting for survival. And as the finale begins, almost every major character is standing on the edge of disaster. But the biggest danger is not necessarily the army outside the walls. It may be the people standing beside them. Rhaenyra Targaryen has finally achieved what she wanted. She sits on the Iron Throne, but power has never felt more fragile. King's Landing is struggling, food is running short, money is disappearing, violence is spreading, and the people are becoming increasingly desperate. Rhaenyra knows that fear can be useful, but fear can also become a weapon against the person sitting on the throne. And now she has another problem. Corlys Velaryon is missing. What Rhaenyra doesn't fully understand yet is that Corlys isn't simply absent. He is being held prisoner by Ormond Hightower. Ormond has already demonstrated that he is willing to do whatever it takes to weaken Rhaenyra. And he has just made his most dangerous move. Ulf. Ulf was once one of Rhaenyra's dragon riders. Now Ormond has offered him something he has always wanted: respect, power, and the promise of Driftmark. For a man driven by pride and resentment, that offer may be impossible to resist. And Ulf has something incredibly valuable: a dragon, Silverwing. This means the Greens could suddenly have another dragon on their side, and that could completely change the coming battle. But there is something even more frightening. Rhaenyra doesn't know about it yet, and Ormond has no reason to tell her. He wants the betrayal to happen at the worst possible moment. For weeks, the Hightower forces have been trapped at Tumbleton. They have used the town's population as protection while waiting for reinforcements and an opportunity to strike. Now, the Riverlands army is approaching. The Winter Wolves are coming. Daemon Targaryen is preparing to join the fight, and the Hightowers are running out of options. But Ormond has been preparing his own surprise. He believes Ulf's betrayal can turn the battle in his favor. And if Silverwing joins the Greens, the Blacks could suddenly find themselves fighting a dragon they once considered an ally. This is exactly the kind of betrayal the Dance of the Dragons is famous for. Nobody stays loyal forever. Nobody can be trusted completely. And sometimes the person standing beside you is more dangerous than the enemy standing across the battlefield.
While Rhaenyra's position becomes more unstable, another Targaryen is quietly returning to the game: Aegon. For much of the season, Aegon has been reduced to a broken fugitive. His body has been burned. His political power has collapsed. His enemies believe him defeated. And even Aegon himself seemed ready to disappear. But then came the revelation that changed everything. Sunfyre survived. The golden dragon that everyone believed had died after Rook's Rest was never truly dead. He was badly wounded. He was barely able to move, but he survived. And when Aegon's life was threatened, Sunfyre returned. The reunion between Aegon and Sunfyre is more than a spectacular moment. It is symbolic. Both of them have been broken by the war. Both carry scars. Both have been underestimated. And both have survived. Aegon had spent so much of the season running from his enemies. Now he has a reason to stop. Because in Westeros, a king without power is just a man. But a Targaryen king with a dragon? That's a different story. Sunfyre gives Aegon a weapon, but more importantly, he gives Aegon confidence. The former king can now make his own decisions. He can gather supporters. He can intimidate rival lords. And he can once again challenge Rhaenyra. But there is another person Aegon needs to worry about: his brother, Aemond. The Targaryen family is now divided into multiple competing factions. Rhaenyra wants the throne, Aegon wants it back. Aemond has his own ambitions. Daemon has supporters who want him crowned. and every one of them has a reason to believe that they should be the one ruling Westeros. The family isn't fighting one war anymore. They're fighting several wars at once. So what does Aegon do now? One possibility is escape. He could cross the Narrow Sea. He could go to Essos. He could hide, recover, and rebuild his strength. But there's a problem. News travels quickly in Westeros. Soon, everyone will know. Aegon is alive, and his dragon is alive. That could be enough to change the calculations of dozens of lords. People who previously supported Rhaenyra may suddenly wonder if Aegon still has a chance. And that is the most dangerous thing about his return. He doesn't need to win a battle immediately. He only needs people to believe he can win. Because once people believe a king can win, they start supporting him. But while Aegon finds new hope, Aemond is heading in the opposite direction. Aemond has always been dangerous, but now he is becoming unpredictable. At Harrenhal, the prince has spent much of the season surrounded by uncertainty. His ambitions are enormous. He dreams of power. He talks about conquest. He believes he can build something of his own. But his biggest advantage has disappeared. Vhagar. The most powerful dragon in Westeros is nowhere to be seen. Without Vhagar, Aemond is much more vulnerable than he wants anyone to realize. And then his own mother betrays him. Alicent has finally reached the point where she believes her son must be stopped. Aemond has become too dangerous. He has already shown that he is willing to kill his own brother, so Alicent poisons him. Aemond collapses, and Alicent escapes. For a moment, it appears that the story of Aemond Targaryen might finally be over. But there is one person still at Harrenhal, Alys Rivers. And Alys is not an ordinary woman. She has already demonstrated strange powers. She sees things others cannot. She understands forces that the Targaryens barely comprehend. So when Aemond collapses at her feet, there is a question hanging over the entire finale. Is Aemond really dead? Probably not. And if Alys saves him, Aemond will wake up knowing something horrifying. His own mother tried to kill him. That changes a man, especially someone like Aemond. Aemond has always believed that strength is the only language people understand. Now he has another reason to abandon mercy. He has been betrayed by Alicent, he has been isolated from his family, his political ambitions are threatened, and his brother Aegon is suddenly alive again. That means Aemond has a new enemy. Not just Rhaenyra, not just the Blacks. Aegon. The two brothers could eventually become rivals for the same throne, and that is one of the most dangerous possibilities in the entire dance. Because if Aegon and Aemond turn against each other, the Greens could destroy themselves without Rhaenyra even needing to defeat them. And then there is Helaena. Throughout the series, her visions have seemed strange and disconnected, but they may be becoming increasingly important. She has seen images of fire, death, dragons, snow, darkness, and now Dreamfire. Her visions may be telling her that another catastrophe is approaching. The frightening possibility is that Helaena may know more about the future than anyone else, but she doesn't necessarily understand what she is seeing, and that makes her visions even more terrifying, because sometimes knowing that something terrible is coming is worse than not knowing at all.
Everything has been building toward this moment. For an entire season, House of the Dragon has been moving its characters into position. Rhaenyra has taken King's Landing. Aegon has lost almost everything. Aemond has become increasingly dangerous. Daemon has been gathering an army. Corlys has been captured. Ulf has lost faith in the Blacks. And now, all of those storylines are about to collide at Tumbleton. But before the battle even begins, there is something we need to understand. Tumbleton isn't just another battlefield. It is where loyalty finally stops meaning anything. Because when the fighting begins, the biggest danger may not come from the enemy. It may come from the people standing on your own side. The Riverlands forces are finally approaching Tumbleton. Daemon is there. Roddy the Ruin is there. Oscar Tully is there. And behind them is an army that has been marching toward this confrontation for a long time. Inside Tumbleton, the Hightowers know their position is becoming increasingly difficult. They have spent weeks hiding behind the town's population, but that protection is disappearing. The enemy is approaching, their supplies are limited, and their options are shrinking. Ormond Hightower knows that if the battle begins under normal circumstances, the Greens could be overwhelmed. So he needs something unexpected, something powerful enough to change the numbers. And that's where Ulf comes in. Ulf is not motivated by some grand political philosophy. That's what makes him so dangerous. He isn't switching sides because he suddenly believes the Greens have the stronger claim. He wants recognition. He wants power.
He wants the respect he believes Rhaenyra and Daemon denied him, and Aemond understands that perfectly. He offers Ulf something that sounds almost irresistible: Driftmark. For Ulf, this is the moment when years of feeling insignificant could finally disappear. But there's a catch. To receive Driftmark, he has to betray the woman who gave him a dragon. And now Ulf has Silverwing, a dragon powerful enough to change the outcome of a battle. So imagine the moment the Blacks realize what has happened. They expect Silverwing to fight beside them. Instead, the dragon appears on the opposite side. That is the kind of betrayal that doesn't simply damage an army, it destroys morale. Because if a dragon rider can switch sides, who can the Blacks trust anymore? And then, the fighting starts. The peaceful town is transformed into a battlefield. Soldiers clash in the streets, horses panic, fire spreads, and above them, dragons take to the sky. This is where the scale of the Dance of the Dragons becomes terrifying. A battle between armies is already devastating, but when dragons enter the equation, entire sections of the battlefield can disappear in seconds. One blast of dragonfire can destroy dozens of soldiers. A single dragon can turn a victory into a massacre. And now the Greens potentially have Silverwing. The Blacks suddenly have a serious problem. Ulf's betrayal isn't simply a military development, it is a psychological attack against Rhaenyra. Because Rhaenyra has spent the season believing that her authority can hold the Blacks together. But one by one, that belief is collapsing. First, there are political enemies. Then there are military problems. Then Corlys is captured. Then Daemon becomes increasingly difficult to control. And now, one of her own dragon riders has turned against her. Rhaenyra doesn't just lose a dragon, she loses trust, and that's much more dangerous. Because once a ruler becomes convinced that everyone around them is plotting against them, they stop listening, they stop forgiving, and eventually, they start ruling through fear. This is perhaps the most important character development of the finale. Rhaenyra has always believed she was fighting for her rightful inheritance, but the longer the war continues, the more that original purpose becomes blurred. At first, she wanted justice, then she wanted the throne, now she wants survival, and those are three very different things. The woman who once hoped to avoid unnecessary bloodshed is now surrounded by people telling her that violence is the only language her enemies understand. Her council is divided, her allies are disappearing, her family is falling apart, and the throne she fought so hard to obtain is beginning to feel less like a victory and more like a prison. That's why the question of whether Rhaenyra will become a tyrant becomes so important. She may not wake up one morning and suddenly become evil. It happens gradually, one decision at a time, one execution, one betrayal, one enemy, one sacrifice, until eventually she looks back and realizes she has become the kind of ruler she once feared. While Rhaenyra is struggling to keep her kingdom together, Aegon is beginning a completely different journey. For most of the season, Aegon was a broken man. He had lost his crown, he had lost his political power, his body had been destroyed. He had every reason to disappear forever. And then Sunfyre returned. That moment changes Aegon, because the dragon isn't just a weapon. Sunfyre is proof that Aegon isn't finished. The world believed both king and dragon were defeated. They weren't. They survived. And now Aegon has a choice: run or fight. For the first time in a long time, Aegon has something worth fighting for: his throne, his name, his revenge, and perhaps most importantly, his chance to prove that Rhaenyra hasn't won yet. But Sunfyre's return carries another meaning. Book readers know exactly where this road can lead. Sunfyre is connected to Rhaenyra's ultimate fate, and that makes the dragon's return incredibly ominous. The show deliberately allowed audiences to believe Sunfyre had died. Then it brought him back at the exact moment Aegon needed him. That is not just fan service. It could be foreshadowing. Because if the series follows the broad direction of the source material, Sunfyre may eventually become the dragon responsible for Rhaenyra's death. Which means the emotional reunion we just witnessed could eventually become one of the darkest relationships in the entire story. The dragon that saved Aegon could one day destroy Rhaenyra. And that's the cruel irony of the Dance of the Dragons. The things that give these characters hope often become the things that destroy them. And then there is another threat waiting in the shadows: Aemond. Alicent believed she had dealt with him. She poisoned him. He collapsed. She escaped. But Aemond is not an ordinary man, and Harrenhal is not an ordinary place. Alys Rivers remains with him. If anyone can save Aemond, it may be her. And if Aemond survives, he wakes up with an entirely different understanding of his family. His mother tried to kill him, his brother is alive, his enemies are approaching, and his own ambitions are slipping away. Aemond's response is unlikely to be forgiveness. It's much more likely to be revenge, and that could make him even more dangerous than before. Think about what this means.
There are now 2 green Targaryen brothers who could claim the throne. Aegon has Sunfyre, Aemond has Vhagar. Both believe they have a legitimate path to power, and neither man is particularly good at sharing. If they eventually come face to face, the Blacks may not even need to defeat them. The brothers could destroy each other. And that's one of the central tragedies of the Targaryen civil war. The family has so many potential heirs that the throne itself becomes a weapon. Everyone wants to protect the dynasty, but every decision they make brings the dynasty closer to destruction. Meanwhile, Corlys remains trapped, and his imprisonment has enormous consequences. The Velaryon fleet is one of Rhaenyra's greatest assets, but without Corlys directing it, the family has to decide what comes next. Alan and Baela are no longer simply children following their father's commands. They have to become leaders themselves. And Corlys' suffering forces them to confront an uncomfortable question. How much are they willing to sacrifice for their family? Because saving Corlys could cost them ships, it could cost them soldiers, it could even cost them their position in the war. But leaving him behind could destroy the Velaryon family's trust in Rhaenyra forever. The queen needs the Velaryons, but the Velaryons are beginning to realize that they don't necessarily need the queen. That difference could become extremely important. And while everyone else is fighting over what is happening now, Helaena may already know what is coming next. Her visions have always seemed strange. Fragments, images, symbols, things that make sense only after the disaster happens. But her latest vision involving Dreamfire is particularly disturbing. She sees fire, she sees an approaching force, she sees darkness, she sees an eclipse, she sees snow, and she sees the children she has lost. These visions could be warning her about the future. But there's another possibility. Maybe Helaena isn't simply predicting the war. Maybe she's beginning to understand it. And if she finally decides to act, Dreamfire could become another major force in the conflict. By this point, every major piece has moved into place. Rhaenyra is becoming increasingly isolated. Aegon is rebuilding his confidence. Sunfyre is alive. Ulf has betrayed the Blacks. Tumbleton is burning. Aemond may still be alive. Corlys remains a prisoner. Helaena is seeing things nobody else understands. And Daemon is preparing for the next stage of the war. There is no clean victory coming. There is only escalation. Every answer creates another question. Every victory creates another enemy. And every dragon that takes flight brings Westeros closer to destruction. The most important message of the finale isn't simply who wins Tumbleton. It's what the battle tells us about the Targaryens. They believed dragons made them untouchable, but dragons didn't protect their family. They made the family more dangerous and more fragile, because once everyone has a dragon, everyone believes they can become king. That's how the dance began, and that's how it will eventually destroy the Targaryens. Rhaenyra wants the throne because she believes it belongs to her. Aegon wants it because he believes he has already been robbed of it. Aemond wants power because he believes he can rule better than both of them. Daemon has supporters who believe he should be king. And every dragon rider believes their dragon gives them the strength to enforce that claim. But the throne doesn't have enough room for all of them. Someone has to lose, and in the Targaryen civil war, losing usually means dying. As the season closes, the most frightening realization is this. The war has not reached its end. It has reached a new stage. The alliances are changing, the dragons are changing sides, the surviving Targaryens are becoming more ruthless, and the line between hero and villain is almost impossible to see anymore. Rhaenyra is no longer simply the wronged princess. Aegon is no longer simply the defeated king. Aemond is no longer simply the dangerous younger brother. They are all becoming products of the war, and the war is changing them. That is what makes the ending so powerful. Because the Dance of the Dragons isn't really a story about who deserves the Iron Throne. It's a story about what happens when a family decides that the throne is worth destroying itself for. And now, there may be no way back. The dragons have survived, the kings and queens have survived, but the family they were supposed to protect, that family is disappearing piece by piece. And when Season 4 eventually arrives, the question won't simply be, who will sit on the Iron Throne? The real question will be, how much of House Targaryen will still be left when the war is finally over? Because the Dance of the Dragons has only one rule. Nobody wins without losing something. And for Rhaenyra, Aegon, Aemond, Daemon, and everyone caught between them, the worst may still be coming.